if the supply and confidence agreement holds, we're not looking at another election for another couple of years. But if things change, how election ready are you? Are you now in election mode?
Welcome back to Another Perspective, everyone. I'm Cypher.
And I'm Fox. As many of you know, this past weekend was the new Democrat Party convention, and it was filled with woke ideology, ego stroking, and all of the insanity we have come to expect from the NDP.
However, a few other things happened at the convention that line up with our prediction about a spring election coming.
One of those things is something we spoke about before in another video, which was a resolution that was put forward to mandate that the NDP withdraw from the supply and confidence agreement and trigger an election if pharmacare was not adopted by the Liberals according to the NDP vision. This resolution was proposed and passed unanimously.
Now we turn our attention to Anne McGrath, who is the national director for the NDP party. But Cypher, you say, what does a national director do? That's a great question. Thanks for asking, drinker. The NDP national director services as the CEO of the NDP. She possesses overall fiduciary responsibility for the party and its operations, including strategic planning, fundraising, banking, and virtually every other aspect of the party. So she really knows what's going on within the party, which makes this interview that we're about to show you that much more significant.
Let's get into it now, shall we?
So as national director, as an organizer of this event, after all the debate and the resolutions, what do you think your party has been able to accomplish here?
Well, I mean, this was the very first in-person gathering of the NDP in 5 years. I think one of the main things, we passed a lot of resolutions, we heard a lot of great speeches, a lot of great panels, great debates, all of that. But the main thing for me, I think, was just the kind of, the networking, the energy that people got from each other, the informal and formal connections that people were able to make. It really, I think, puts a spring in our step as we leave here. And I really had this sense that people feel so passionately about what we're able to do and really want to make sure that there are more NDP members of Parliament.
But as you say that, of the policy resolutions that were debated and passed, and I know that's something that the executive and the leadership's going to have to look at now, but certainly there seems to be a very clear message from your grassroots that they are reaffirming this party's center-left roots and very much proud of being progressives. But do you think that is where the country is right now, given the economic times Canadians are facing, the economic challenge the country faces? Are such progressive policies that do rely on public spending the place where Canadians are right now?
Very good question by Michael. Very good question. Because we all know the answer to that. No!
Well, let me tell you something. When people are struggling to put food on the table and keep a roof over their heads, they're not going to care about things like pronouns. They're not going to care about things like dental care. They're not going to care about things like Medicare because we cannot afford these things.
Well, and they're going to look at it as, I already pay taxes, and yes, our healthcare system sucks, but I don't have to worry about it. All I have to worry about is how long it frickin' takes. And it already takes too long, but still. When you put that in front of voters, when you put that in front of the average person who is struggling to buy groceries, and then you say, hey, we're going to improve the service, but guess what? You're going to have to pay probably twice as much in taxes as you are now. People are not going to go for it. This is not difficult. It is not. And the problem is the NDP, just like the Liberals, think they can just spend money and make it up and keep printing it, and everything will be fine. Whereas Trudeau and the Liberals have completely demonstrated that it is absolutely the opposite of fine when you do that. Because it leads to hyperinflation, super high interest rates, people losing their homes, tent cities and people living in cars and parking lot, because that's their lived experience.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of support for the work that the NDP has been able to do historically in minority parliaments. Many of the social programs that we love and that we cherish and that we rely on came from the NDP's role in minority parliaments over the decades. So I think that there is a lot of faith and trust and hope in what we can do. And I think if you look at the results of some key electoral races over the country in the last little while, you will see that there is an appetite for those socially progressive measures. If you look at the re-election of an NDP government in British Columbia, the largest opposition ever in Alberta is the NDP opposition in Alberta. The opposition to Scott Moe in Saskatchewan is primarily coming from the progressive movements, and cannot in any way underestimate the immense pride that everybody feels in the fact that Wab Kinew is now going to be the Premier of Manitoba. But even here in Ontario, for instance, where I'm located, you know, we look at the magnificent victory of Olivia Chow in Toronto, the largest city in the country, and she was up against the full force of Liberal and Conservative machines, and she won in the largest city in the country. So there's example after example after example. Marit Stiles and what she's been able to do to force Premier Ford onto his back foot for the first time, really, in his mandate, in this mandate, and get a reversal on the Greenbelt decision, and now has the RCMP investigating. So there's a lot of really, really clear examples across the country of people responding well to these kinds of progressive policies, and the character of the politicians who share those priorities and those values.
Oh, you mean the character of the politicians that were actually praising the Palestine demonstrations? Is that the type of character you're talking about, Anne? Really? I don't think so. And you're talking about all kinds of support in BC. You mean where there's an extra 300% people that have died from overdose deaths? Because of all of the safe supply that you've been just giving out that's now being sold to kids?
Well, and then look at Olivia Chow. She was married to Jack Layton, and I think, honestly, that she won on name recognition alone. And then you look at a city like Hamilton that has Andrea Horwath for a mayor. And now one of my best friends lives in Hamilton, and she told me that, you know, back at the beginning of the year, they were trying to coerce or encourage Hamilton residents to take homeless people into their own homes because the city was having a homelessness crisis.
Yeah, so rather than the city deal with it, the mayor said, hey, why don't you open your home? But, you know, she wasn't going to. And I find it interesting that Anne didn't mention Andrea Horwath.
Because she's an embarrassment. She was horrible as leader of the provincial NDP, as leader of the opposition.
Well, the funny thing is she opened this convention. She spoke. And all she could do is say, me. Like,
yeah, maybe we'll do a video on that because it was atrocious.
It was terrible. Thank goodness none of you had to watch that. In terms of Ford's on his back foot because Ford's an idiot. That's why he's on his back foot. He is an idiot. I'm a conservative, but I'm not conservative to the degree that I will follow an idiot. And that's what we've kept saying. We are platform-based on this channel. We follow common sense.
Yeah, like we both voted for Ford the first time, and the second time we both declined our ballots. We went to the polling station and told the head elector that we are declining our ballots because nobody in this province is suitable to lead this province.
Yeah, no one was worthy of our vote.
You know, a lot of the criticism was, of course, given to the Liberal government, but I would say the vast majority of the real criticism was targeted to Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives. What does that say about the strategy that the NDP will be playing between now and whenever a writ may be dropped?
Well, I think there seems to be a mood in the country for change, and people are very disappointed in the Liberal government, and they want something better. I believe that Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives are selling snake oil, and that this is not that none of their proposals will actually improve people's lives. So what we see is that the Liberal government looks like it's done. It looks like people are going to be turning away from that. So it's going to be very important to highlight the regressive policies of Pierre Poilievre and the fact that, number one, when he was in power before, which he actually made people's lives harder. He was part of increasing the age of retirement. He was part of cutting pensions. He's got a track record and a history of being very, very reactionary. So we have to highlight that the kinds of things that they're putting forward are not the kind of change that we need.
So this is very key. This is where it starts to get very interesting with some of the things that Anne's saying. One of the things she said is, the Liberal government is done. That's the first thing she said. Next thing she said is, we think that Canadians and the country are looking for a change.
We sure are.
That's not 2 years from now. That's now. So she's hinting at something, right? If things were looking towards the next election, I would expect Anne to say, well, we still have 2 years to ride this out and see how things go. We have 2 years to... She's not saying any of that. That's what you would expect someone to say.
Yeah, we've got 2 years to drum up support. We've got 2 years to drum up finances.
We got 2 years to force this Liberal government to get things back on track, that sort of thing. She's not saying that. She's saying the Liberal government is done and people want change now. Very interesting.
And then she goes on to kind of attack Harper. And one of the things I noticed she said, and I don't recall if we did a video on this or if it was just me arguing with somebody on Reddit, but the Conservative Party was going to raise the age of retirement because people are living longer. When they instituted the CPP back in, I think it was the 60s, people were only living on average 6 years beyond the age of retirement. So they were retiring at 65 and they were dying usually between 71 and 72. That was average. But now people are living into their 80s or 90s. So there's an extra 20 years almost that people are cashing out on CPP, but not paying into it. So the Harper government had legislated to raise the age of retirement from 65 to 67, and it was supposed to take effect, I believe, this year, 2023. But the Liberals, of course, went in and repealed that legislation, and it stayed 65. One thing the Liberals have failed to calculate, not only are people living longer, but if you are paying into CPP for an extra 2 years from 65 to 67, you're also taking less CPP during those 2 years because you're not taking it at all. So it would have been a way to save the system so that by, the time Cypher and I retire, we're not going to be SOL and not have a retirement at all through CPP.
We also heard critiques from delegates and party members who wanted to have more grassroots say, who are questioning the structure of the way the conference and the debate was actually put together. Does that point for you any type of disunity in the party that you feel needs to be addressed to make sure they come along with the party?
Well, I will say that anybody who watched, what was going on here will see that there was a lot of debate and discussion. I mean, right up to the bitter last moment, there was debate and discussion, people lining up at the microphones to talk very passionately about the things that they care about. So I think that we did as much as possible to make sure that those debates and discussions could happen on the convention floor, but also in the more informal events, whether it was training workshops, other panel discussions, social events. There were lots of opportunities for people to have debate and discussion. But as I said, I think at the very beginning of the convention, there is never going to be enough time and space for that. But in the context of a 2.5 day convention, I think we got a lot in, and I think the delegates are feeling actually quite energized and quite happy and excited that they were here and that they got to do that.
I don't necessarily agree with her conclusion, because I think people are really pissed off with the NDP, like their own party members. I think they're really pissed off because they see what's going on and they see that they're allowing the Liberals to wreck this country.
Well, and they're just going down with the Liberals sinking ship.
Right. And this was basically their last opportunity as delegates and party members to have a voice and say, what the hell are you doing? What the hell are you doing? And that was reflected in the drop of Jagmeet's approval numbers by 20%. So he's down to 81, which is the lowest he's ever been. Now you may say, well, that's still pretty high. Still.
That means 1 in 5 people in that party do not want him as leader.
Right. And that means 1 in 5 people may jump ship in the next election. So that is significant. Very significant. So you had a lot of people, when they say passionate, that means they were pissed off. So yeah, you had a bunch of people that are not happy that the NDP is propping up this government. And that probably leads to one of the last things she's saying. So let's continue.
Okay, energized, happy, and that leads me conveniently to my last question to you, because of course these types of conventions are all about sparking up the base, making sure people are united and ready for another election. If the supply and confidence agreement holds, we're not looking at another election for another couple of years. But if things change, how election ready are you? Are you now in election mode?
We're definitely in election mode. We're nominating candidates. We're raising money. We're knocking on doors. We're getting ready to put forward a full slate of candidates and have a fully funded campaign. And the work is happening right now.
Boom.
There you have it, folks. There you have it.
That was extremely significant. And that was from the mouth of the national director of the NDP.
This is the CEO. She knows the budget. She knows the fundraising. She knows what they're going to do. She has to know what they're going to do because she manages all of the money. So, ladies and gentlemen, NDP is in election mode.
And that's what we've been saying all summer. We've seen it with the Conservatives. There was no doubt there. We've heard it from the Conservatives that they're in election mode, that the other parties are in election mode. And now we're hearing it from the NDP.
So here it comes, everybody. Come January, we are extremely confident that after the Christmas break, if not before, but after the Christmas break, because that's when it makes sense, that you're going to see a pull of the supply and confidence agreement, a non-confidence vote, and the Liberal government will fall.